$237. That's what I paid for a spring break ticket from New York to a place where I'm actually old enough to check into a hotel, Europe. Coming into my flight, I didn't have particularly high expectations. You see, this flight was on TAP Portugal, an airline that I kind of associated with low-cost airlines as they often have some of the cheapest transatlantic flights, usually with a layover in Lisbon. On Saturday, March 12th, I headed to Newark Airport. I had to check in person for this flight, not just to have my passport checked, but also because just having a layover in Portugal meant that I needed to have a COVID test, which I had to show at the desk. Restrictions associated with flying through Lisbon are definitely something to consider when comparing TAP with other airlines, as the cost of COVID tests can really add up. After a relatively long check-in line and some failed attempts to find an open lounge, I headed to my gate in Terminal B. For such an outdated airport, Newark does have some cool planes coming in and out. My flight was booked with a tight connection in Lisbon, and my fear of missing that next flight started to grow as I saw the gate screen casually push back the time of departure from 5:45 to 6:30 without an announcement. Even that departure time didn't prove accurate though, and the mess of a boarding area started to grow impatient. Ultimately, I boarded at about 6:40 on today's Airbus A330-900 Neo. I could have paid extra to choose my seat on this flight, but I went with a random seating assignment for the true cheap experience. Each seat came with a normal pillow and blanket. This clip of the middle seats show what a standard TAP economy seat looks like on this aircraft. To be quite honest, I was really surprised at how comfortable these new seats were, and I was thrilled with the big windows next to me and the adjustable headrest. I also got a brief look at the bathroom a bit after boarding, which as of then was well lit and clean. We pushed back just before 7, and at 7:09 we took off on runway 4L. Roughly an hour later, I got to open this rather unique fold-out tray table for dinner. Dinner included a bread bun, salad, a piece of cake, and I chose pasta. This meal service was a mix of one of the best and worst experiences I've had with airline food. The food itself was amazing. Ignoring a few tiny parts of the pasta that had burnt onto the package, it actually tasted really great, as did the cake. The downside was that this flight had some of the worst turbulence I've ever experienced on a flight, to the point where I legitimately struggled to eat all of my food without getting sick. Obviously, that's not really TAP's fault, so the $200 flight is proving to be a win so far. One difficulty I had with this flight was the Wi-Fi. TAP advertises free messaging on this flight, but I was barely able to ever use it. A mix of error and loading screens throughout the flight, paired with the fact that you had to quote repurchase the free messaging every few hours, made it really hard to use. Some of these issues were certainly caused by us being over the middle of the Atlantic, but that's definitely not the best considering the amount of transatlantic routes TAP has on which they advertise this service. Only 3 hours after dinner, we got a box with breakfast. Although much simpler and not as great as the dinner, you can never go wrong with a ham and cheese sandwich and a granola bar. At around 5:30 a.m. Lisbon time, the city came into view and we soon landed on runway 3. We taxied into Lisbon's one terminal, and by 5:55 a.m. I was off the plane. Given that my next flight was at 7:15 and I had to pass Portuguese COVID checks, Schengen border patrol, and Portuguese airport security, I didn't get many clips in the airport. As many other TAP reviews mention, Lisbon is clearly not built for all the traffic that TAP brings through. This was especially noticeable now, during one of Lisbon's connection banks where tons of international TAP flights arrive with passengers waiting to connect onwards. What really surprised me was TAP's connection team. Throughout the airport, including passport control and security, there were TAP representatives pulling passengers who had tight connections aside and bringing them to the front of the line. Because of this, I was able to get all the way from passport control to my gate in mere minutes, and after a short bus ride to a distantly parked plane, I was on an A320 headed, on time, to Madrid. Overall, I was really pleasantly surprised by TAP. My ticket included no checked bags but did include a carry-on, and it lacked seat selection. But nowadays, that's pretty standard for a basic economy ticket on any of the big airlines. And despite my cheap ticket, TAP staff was always really nice and helpful. While you have to be on the lookout for deals as good as the one I got, relatively cheap fares on TAP are fairly common, and in my experience, it was more than worth it.